Hans, my parents are planning to take your house tonight, my 10-year-old grandson whispered, his words crashing like a sudden storm, shattering the peace I'd carefully maintained for years. I, a grandfather of 72, who had always welcomed them with open arms, my savings and my trust, stood there with a calm face, masking the jolt beneath the same steady demeanor I'd worn at Anna's funeral. But what I did next would twist their scheme into a snare they'd never anticipate. I'd outmaneuver them at their own game, and they'd never forget it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The warning had stirred earlier that morning. Papa, I need to talk to you. Lucas's voice wavered through the phone, cutting through the soft clink of my spoon against the coffee cup and the distant murmur of the sea beyond my deck. It was just past 7 a.m., and Lucas never called this early unless something was amiss. His tone carried a nervous edge I hadn't heard since he was 16 and scratched my old shed with his bike. "What's the matter, son?" I asked, easing back in my chair, watching the steam rise from my cup as the sunrise cast long golden stripes across the pine table. "Greta and I were talking," he said, his words tumbling out too quickly, too polished. "We think it's important you come early to Max's birthday party today." "Early?" "I've never missed one of his birthdays," I replied, my voice even. There was a pause, then a faint mutter, Greta's voice, sharp and urgent in the background. Lucas's tone shifted. "He really wants you there. Party starts at 2, but maybe come by 1:30. We've got some family matters to discuss." My fingers tightened around the cup. Family matters wasn't a phrase Lucas used lightly, not in the 4 years since Anna's passing. "What kind of matters?" I kept my tone breezy, but my gut was already chilling. "Just planning ahead, making sure everyone's looked after," he said. That phrase, I'd heard it too often in meetings and quiet deals where everyone usually meant themselves. "Still," I said, "of course I'll be there early. Wouldn't miss it." I hung up, but the unease lingered like an uninvited guest. Hours later, Max found me on the deck, his small hand tugging at my sleeve, his eyes darting across the yard before he leaned close with his confession. In his voice, I heard both fear and a courage no child should need. "I heard them last night," he said, his words quick and hushed. "They were in the kitchen. Mama said he's too old to stay here alone. And Papa mentioned bank documents. She told him it'd be too late for you to stop it." My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "Did you hear anything else?" Max nodded, chewing his lip. "Papa said, 'What if he finds out?' And Mama said, 'It'll be done by then.'" I knelt to meet his gaze. "You did right by telling me, but this stays between us, okay?" He hesitated. "Will you still love me if they get upset?" My chest ached, but I answered firmly, "Nothing they do could ever change how much I love you." He gave a small nod, carrying a burden too heavy for his years. I sent him to help Greta with the party, hiding our talk behind a warm smile. From the deck, I watched Lucas chatting with neighbors, his gestures wide and lively. The perfect host. Greta stood beside him, her hand lightly on his arm, her eyes sweeping the property like an appraiser sizing up a sale. They didn't know their plan was already cracking. The air smelled of salt and pine, the ocean calm beyond the dunes. But my mind was racing, strategizing, assessing. Anna's voice echoed in my memory. "Hans, don't let pride make you rash, but don't let fear shrink you." She'd known Lucas's flaws, had warned me years ago to watch him when someone else was pulling the strings. Back then, I thought she meant his school friends. Now, I saw she meant Greta. I went inside, setting the kettle on for the noise more than the tea. I opened the drawer where I keep my notebooks, the ones I've used for every project, every budget, every serious decision. I wrote the date, then 3 words: bank documents ready. Greta's brief stint in finance gave her enough knowledge to dress a dangerous move in the guise of care. In my years managing a business, I'd seen power of attorney forms, conservatorship filings, and the slow processes that could strip a man of his wealth and freedom before he felt the trap close. If they wanted to play legal games, they'd learn I'd spent a lifetime building structures that withstand storms. The morning buzzed with pre-party activity, the scent of cake and coffee, the rustle of wrapping paper. Ingrid Schmidt, my neighbor and a retired bank clerk, dropped by with a tray for the party. She greeted me warmly, then quietly mentioned seeing Lucas and Greta downtown 2 days ago, leaving the bank with a thick bundle of papers. Looked official, she said. They were in a rush. I thanked her, tucking the detail alongside Max's warning, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. By 1 o'clock, I was ready. Max's gifts, a sketchbook and a stargazing guide, stacked by the door. I arrived at Lucas's house at precisely 1:30. Greta greeted me with a smile too bright, her hand lingering on my arm a moment too long. "Hans, so glad you're here. You look great." Lucas appeared, slapping my shoulder. "Papa, right on time. Let's get you settled, then we can talk before the guests arrive." But before any discussion, Max ran over, his smile real and unforced, hugging me tightly. I handed him the wrapped sketchbook, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Then I caught Greta watching us, her eyes sharpening briefly before she turned to greet another guest. The living room was adorned with banners and balloons, a fancier setup than Greta usually bothered with for family gatherings. Guests arrived, laughter mingling with music, but beneath it, I sensed their careful orchestration. Lucas and Greta subtly guiding conversations, steering me toward certain people. I played along, smiling, chatting, but noting every glance they shared. As the afternoon waned, the crowd thinned. Around 5 o'clock, Lucas caught my eye. "Papa, why don't you stay a bit after? We can go over those family matters we mentioned?" Greta added smoothly. "It won't take long. We've been working on something to make things easier for you." I nodded, concealing that my own plan was taking shape, one requiring timing, witnesses, and the precision I'd honed over decades. They thought tonight they'd seize control. They didn't know it would be the night I began taking it back. By the time the last of Max's friends left, and the paper plates were piled in the bin, the light outside had softened to a warm dusk. The party's hum had faded, leaving just Lucas, Greta, and me in the living room. I knew this was the moment they'd orchestrated. Lucas glanced at the door, ensuring no one else would enter, then leaned against the sofa's arm. "Papa," he said, his voice softer than usual, "let's sit for a minute, just us." Greta was already moving to the dining table, a spot with no view of the sea, no distractions, just a clear surface for documents. I followed, my steps deliberate, my face the same calm I'd maintained all day. Inside, my mind was mapping angles, distances, and the slight bulge in Greta's leather bag by her chair. She sat across from me, her posture poised yet relaxed, like a banker closing a deal she's sure of winning. "We've been thinking about your future," she began, hands neatly folded. about easing the burden of bills, errands, bank visits. Lucas slid into the seat beside her, nodding. It's about helping you, Papa. We want to lift some of that load. My eyes flicked to the bag. Greta noticed, and without pausing her sentence, unzipped it and pulled out a slim folder. My stomach recognized the heavy paper before my mind did, the kind law firms use to make their work feel final. She placed it between us, turning it to face me. The top page had a yellow tab marking the signature line, the header in bold. Durable power of attorney. Lucas smiled as if offering a gift. This just lets us handle things for you if something comes up. You'd still be in charge. It's just a backup. That word, just, was one I'd heard in too many deals, the sweetener hiding the hook. Greta reached into the folder again, pulling out another document, its title tightening my chest. Transfer on death deed. It's a precaution, she said lightly, as if discussing an extra lock on the door. If something happens, the property passes to the family without probate. It's smooth. You'd live here as long as you want. My fingers grazed the paper's edge, feeling the texture without looking down. You've already filled these out, I said. Just the basics, Greta replied. Names, addresses. All it needs is your signature and a notary stamp. We can get that tomorrow. Lucas jumped in, too eager. It's better to do it now, Papa. Tomorrow's Saturday, banks are open half a day. We can wrap it up quick. I studied his face. The urgency wasn't about helping me. It was about locking something in before the weekend closed. What's the rush? I asked, keeping my tone curious, not accusing. Lucas shifted. We've been discussing it for months, he said, glancing at Greta. With last winter's storms, the house repairs, you've got a lot to handle. We think it's time. Greta leaned in, her voice confiding. We saw what happened to Frau Müller down the road when she had that accident. No paperwork, and her kids had to battle the bank to cover her bills. We don't want that for you. It was a solid story, believable, caring, but I knew Frau Müller's accident was a minor slip, and she'd managed her affairs fine. I appreciate the thought, I said, meaning it as narrowly as possible. Greta slid a pen across the table, its ink heavy and sure. If we do this now, we can avoid trouble later. From the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Max, his hand gripping the doorframe, listening. Our eyes met briefly, and I gave a faint nod. He stayed, watching. I picked up the pen, rolling it in my fingers. You've already talked to the bank, I said. Lucas nodded. We've got a joint account ready once this is signed. Makes it easier to handle your payments. That was the slip. Joint access was the first step to merging funds, and merging funds was the first step to draining them. And the house? I asked. Greta didn't flinch. The deed just simplifies things if needed. You'd be the life tenant, staying here until... She paused, letting the silence speak. You choose otherwise. Lucas finished, too fast. Their pitch was accelerating, pushing me from questions to signing without room to think, which told me they feared I might think. I set the pen down. I don't sign anything without reading every word. Greta's smile tightened, not reaching her eyes. Of course, take your time. She nudged the folder closer. I opened it, scanning slowly. It was all there. Broad clauses about acting in my best interest, permissions for property sales, no need for my approval on transactions under 50,000 euros. In the deed, a subtle clause allowing refinancing to preserve value without my consent. This is detailed, I said. We wanted to be thorough, Lucas replied. Just looking out for you. I closed the folder gently. Then you won't mind if I have Ingrid look it over. She knows these things better than I do. Greta's smile stiffened. That's not needed. We had it reviewed already. Then it'll hold up to another opinion, I said evenly. Lucas's jaw twitched, the first crack in his confidence. Papa, we're trying to help, he said. And I'm trying to make sure we all sleep soundly tonight, I replied. The air in the room shifted. Greta reached for the pen again, but I slid it back toward her. Tomorrow, I said. 10 a.m., with witnesses. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Greta leaned back, feigning ease. Fine, tomorrow, she said. Lucas forced a grin, but his eyes darted, calculating the cost of this delay. I stood, letting the chair legs scrape just enough to signal the conversation's end. I'll let myself out, I said, heading for the door. As I passed the hallway, Max's hand brushed mine for a fleeting second. You okay? He whispered. Better than they know. I murmured back. Outside, the evening air carried the scent of salt and pine, now heavy with the momentum of what had begun. They thought they were close to victory. They didn't realize they just handed me the tools to unravel their scheme on my terms. I left Lucas's house, the folder's weight still in my hands, light as paper, heavy with intent. The road home traced the dark edge where the sea keeps its secrets. By the time my porch light came into view, the night had settled into that deep coastal stillness. Not silent, but breathing steadily, making a man hear his own footsteps. I unlocked the door, placed the folder on the pine table, and flicked on the kitchen lamp. Its warm glow made the papers look mundane, as if a signature could ever be simple. There are nights for sleeping and nights for building. Tonight, I built. I pulled a notebook from the drawer, wrote the time, 8:41 p.m., and began a list with the precision of a man measuring beams. 1. Witnesses. 2. Counsel. 3. Evidence of pattern. 4. Room layout. 5. My voice. I don't raise it, I wield it. I picked up my phone and typed carefully. No room for errors. To Ingrid. Need you here tomorrow, 10 a.m., with your niece who notarizes. Serious matter. Reply yes if you can. To Carl Weber. Carl, urgent. POA pushed on me tonight. Need your eyes and presence, 10 a.m. at my place. Coffee's on me. Bring your calm. The screen lit my palm as the messages sent. Within a minute, Ingrid's reply blinked. Yes. We'll be there. No questions. Carl took longer. He always read twice before answering. I'll be there. Sign nothing. Bring nothing to them. Let them bring it to you, he wrote. My lips twitched, almost a smile. I set the phone beside the folder and opened it. Durable power of attorney. Transfer on death deed. A third sheet I hadn't noticed at the table slid forward. Third-party authorization for my insurer, granting full access to policy inquiries and changes. Greta had thought of utilities I rarely consider until a storm hits. Good. The tighter their trap, the cleaner it would snap back. Pacing matters when they're rushing you, so I slowed the room. I brewed coffee I wouldn't drink, rinsed the same cup twice, and moved through the house, listening to the wood's quiet strength. It still held me firm. From the office closet, I took the old metal lockbox, set it on the table, and turned the key. Inside, the ledger I'd started the day I saw Greta at the bank with Lucas, entries in black ink stretching back a year. I read the list of aid I'd given my son. 1,500 euros for car repairs, 4,200 euros for gym equipment, 2,800 euros for tuition gaps, 8,000 euros for quarterly taxes, 1,100 euros for home insurance, 2,600 euros for HVAC. On and on, 74 lines with dates and notes. Each seemed reasonable then, warmed by family ties. Under the lamp, on a yellow pad, it looked like grooming. I laid the ledger open to its last page, placed last year's property tax receipts beside it, and set the house deed on top, its faint county record scent rising. Evidence of pattern. Check. I added a small audio recorder to the pile, a cheap tool I used for dusty-handed consulting notes. I didn't need a secret tape to win. I needed it to recall. People speak truth differently when they think time's theirs. I wrote on the pad, "Seat them facing the light. Me with my back to the window. Witnesses by the door." Layout matters. If Lucas tried to nudge the pen into my hand by reflex, the room would make him hesitate. I lifted Anna's photo from the safe and turned the dial. 11/23/79, our wedding date. The door clicked open, revealing the documents that shape a life. Birth certificate, marriage license, military discharge, old knee surgery records, and the will I drafted 3 months after Anna's death, when tomorrow became a stranger. I set the will beside the deed, its clause leaving the house to Lucas if I went first, with a trust for Max's education. I touched Anna's name on the page and spoke aloud, as this house has heard all my vital words. I kept my promise. I just didn't see how fast he'd trade his. The old anger flared, pressing my ribs, but I let it pass. Rage persuades at midnight. By morning, it stumbles. I needed words that held. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the hallway, where our years hang framed. Lucas in a soccer jersey, big as a tent. Anna in a blue coat, laughing into a storm. Max with clay on his cheek, holding a lopsided birdhouse like it was a masterpiece. "Birds don't mind waiting," he'd written. Tonight, I took that as permission. My phone buzzed. Ingrid again. "Niece can notarize at 10. She'll bring her journal." "Anything else?" I typed. "Your steady presence," and left it there. Then I called a number I'd jotted last winter, never expecting to use. The direct line of a bank VP I'd designed an accessible branch for years ago. "Hans Muller?" I said when he answered. "I need you tomorrow, not as a banker, but as a man who knows what these words mean." I read only the document titles. POA, TOD deed, insurer authorization. He replied, "Don't play clever tonight. Be thorough. If it's legitimate, witnesses won't hurt it. If it's not, they'll make it behave." I thanked him and hung. My watch read 10:12. The recorder sat patient on the table. The house clock ticked like a steady pulse. The folder held a stapled page I hadn't seen. Care Transition Plan Draft. Greta wasn't just after my bills. She wanted a story in print for any petition they might file. Noted, increased forgetfulness, difficulty driving at night, repeated misplacement of keys, phone. I read their lies and felt grief and clarity tip toward the latter. Images flashed. Greta slipping an assisted living pamphlet under my tea tin. Lucas mentioning joint accounts as if seamless meant safe. This wasn't a one-night grab. It was a long game. I wrote 3 sentences on the pad, as I once did for tense client pitches. 1, I am competent. 2, I have a history of financial support for my son. 3, I am revising my estate to protect my grandson. I underlined the last twice and set the pencil down. I rehearsed tomorrow in my mind, step by step, like a blueprint. Ingrid and her niece at 9:50, Carl at 9:58. Coffee poured and cooling to a welcoming warmth. Lucas and Greta at 10 sharp, with their polished smiles and pen. I arranged the chairs precisely, placed the folder on the mantel where morning light would catch it, and left the ledger open. No theatrics, just inevitability for anyone watching. I flicked the porch light off, then on, an old habit from days of early departures and late returns, a promise to the house I'd be back. I checked the perimeter, back door locked, office door open, Anna's photo straight. People think the night before a showdown hums like a drum. Sometimes it's a man testing hinges. In the bedroom, I sat on the bed's edge and dialed one last number. Max's little smartwatch, its screen flashing a cartoon star. He answered in a whisper from his room. "Opa, I'm home," I said. "Everything is set. Tomorrow, some grown-ups who know how to keep things fair will be here. You did your part. Now sleep." Max was quiet so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, "Do you still love Mama and Papa?" Kids always find the raw nerves. "I love them," I said. "I don't love what they're trying to do." "Will they be mad at me?" "They won't know," I said. "And if they ever do, I'll stand between you and their anger." He let out a shaky breath, like the one I'd felt on my wrist earlier. "Okay. Good night." "Good night, Max," I said, and hung up, the house settling around me like it agreed. Sleep came in fragments, not a blanket. I let it. Each time I woke, the plan sat steady by the window, like an old friend who knows the call's purpose. At 5:47, the sky turned the shade that makes sailors check the horizon. I rose before the alarm, my feet hitting the floor. The morning smelled of damp pine and coffee grounds. I shaved to steady my hands, put on the blue shirt Anna loved. She said it turned my stubbornness into strength. At 9:15, I reread the POA, circling 3 phrases in pencil. Best interest, reasonable access, emergency determination. Trap doors, everyone. At 9:30, I walked to the mailbox and back, letting my body measure the line I wouldn't cross. At 9:44, Ingrid's car crunched softly on the gravel, like a polite knock. She stepped out with a thermos and a hug that said business, not chatter. Her niece Lena followed, mid-30s, neat, carrying a leather journal and the small stamp that turns ink into history. "Morning," Ingrid said. "You look like you built a dam last night." "Just laid the beams," I said. "Carl's 2 minutes out," she added, glancing at her phone. We arranged the chairs as planned, me with the light at my back, witnesses by the door, 2 empty seats across the table for the pitch. Lena opened her notary journal with a faint snap, setting out a plain pen with purpose. "Coffee?" I offered. "Strong," Ingrid said. "Always," Lena added. At 9:58, Carl stepped in, raincoat half-zipped, eyes scanning like a carpenter sizing up a frame. He shook my hand without pleasantries, glanced at the folder from a distance, like a doctor studying a scan before asking about pain. "Let them lay it out," he said quietly. "Then you ask your one question." Which one? I said, though I knew. The one that builds the record. Is there anything here that transfers control of my property without my express consent? If they say no, point to their own words. He tapped the circled emergency determination. If they say yes, Lena writes it in her journal, and we all sign like it's a holiday. I exhaled sharply through my nose. And if they've got a doctor ready for a competency test? Carl's mouth curved, not quite a smile. I'll handle that part. The clock hit 10 o'clock. Timing speaks its own language. I left the door open, letting the house show it had no secrets. 2 car doors slammed, then voices. Bright, practiced cheer. The kind of people who've convinced themselves they're righteous because they say so. Greta's perfume arrived before she did. Lucas followed, his face set to warm, his eyes meeting mine with forced ease. He saw Carl first, then Ingrid, then Lena's journal, and I watched his expression recalculate. Greta didn't waver. Her smile widened, as if this was better than planned. "Oh," she said, "you brought help." "You brought help," I said evenly, nodding at the folder under her arm. Seemed only fair. Lucas's gaze flicked to Carl. "We didn't think we'd need lawyers for family." "I'm a friend," Carl said, "and family deserves the best paperwork." Greta sat, placing the folder down, aligning it precisely with the table's edge, her eyes meeting mine with deliberate calm. "Shall we start?" she asked. "Let's," I said, resting my hand lightly on the pine, the house solid beneath me. The game they thought they controlled had shifted. They hadn't felt the ground move yet. Lucas sat across from me, palms flat on the table as if staking a claim on the moment. Greta set the folder between us like a carefully wrapped gift, edges crisp, clasp secure. Lena's pen rested ready in her hand. Ingrid sat still, reading the room like a book she already knew. Carl leaned back, arms relaxed, but his gaze sharp, the kind that says, "I've seen this before and I know the ending." When they set your stage, you control the spotlight. I reached forward, not for the folder, but for my coffee, taking a slow sip, letting the silence press against Greta's poise. She broke it first. "Hans," she began, her voice smooth as honey, "this is about lightening your load. Lucas and I see how much you manage alone. Bills, house upkeep, decisions. We want to ease that burden." I nodded slightly, as if she'd commented on the tide. "Thoughtful," I said, "but I'm curious what that looks like on paper." Lucas opened the folder with the ease of someone sharing a recipe, not binding documents. He slid the top sheet toward me. "This is a durable power of attorney," he said. "It stays active if, heaven forbid, you can't make decisions. It just lets me step in and manage things." "Manage things?" I echoed, glancing at Carl. His eyes flicked to Lena, who lowered her pen to the journal, not yet writing. Greta leaned in. "It's standard, Hans. You'd keep full control while you're well. This is just a safeguard." "Safeguard," I said softly, my finger resting on the heading. "Durable power of attorney. Is there anything here that transfers control of my property without my express consent?" Lucas paused, just a heartbeat, but in a room waiting for it, it was enough. "No," he said, too fast. Carl reached over, flipped to the second page without looking at me. "Then explain this," he said, tapping the circled emergency determination. "This lets you act instantly if you deem an emergency, even without Hans's agreement. That's not a safeguard. That's a key. Greta's mouth tightened, her smile cracking. It's precautionary, she said. If he were ill, we'd call an ambulance, I cut in. Not a bank. Timing is a tide. You let it swell, then pull it back sharp. I lifted the next document. Transfer on death deed. Lucas started to speak, but I raised a hand. This one, I said, changes the house title the moment I'm gone. No probate, straight to you. That's efficient. It saves legal fees, Greta said. Any good planner would recommend it. System. I had a good planner, I said. She wore a blue coat and laughed at storms. She didn't slip clauses in without my say-so. Lucas shifted, his chair creaking. Papa, we're just trying to protect the family. Protect, I said, by pre-filling a deed. By drafting a care plan that claims I'm confused at dusk, that I lose my keys. His eyes widened, not because I was wrong, but because I'd read it. Ingrid leaned forward slightly, catching every word. Greta's voice sharpened. We've noticed things, Hans. We're concerned, that's all. Concerned enough, Carl said evenly. To push for conservatorship before the next quarter? The words landed like a well-placed nail, not loud, but firm, like a lock snapping shut. Lena's pen scratched in her journal, the sound deliberate. Greta glanced at the notary stamp beside her. You brought a notary? You brought a pen, I said. I thought we'd make it official either way. Lucas exhaled hard, leaning back. Cut, this is absurd. We're family. And family, I said, deserves the best paperwork. The shift came when I slid my folder across the table, ledger open, receipts visible, the will resting on top. Here's my record of support for you, Lucas, I said. 74 instances in the last year alone. No clauses, no witnesses, no demand for your signature. If you think I'm unfit to manage my affairs, explain why I was fit enough to fund yours. The room stilled, save for the faint hum of the fridge. Greta eyed the ledger, then Lucas, recalculating. We just don't want you taken advantage of, she said finally. Too late, I replied. That's been happening for a while. The difference now is witnesses. Ingrid shifted, a quiet ally, while Lena's pen scratched again. Carl broke the silence. Hans, do you consent to signing any documents presented today? No, I said. Do you wish to state your capacity to manage your affairs? Yes, I am competent. I have a documented history of financial support for my son, and I am revising my estate to protect my grandson. Lena wrote each word precisely, then turned the journal for me to sign. My name in ink felt like setting the final beam in a frame. Lucas's voice dropped low, but in the quiet, it carried. You're making a mistake, Papa. Maybe, I said, but it'll be mine to make. The air eased as I stood, gathering my folder. We're done here. Greta rose, her perfume cloying now, and met my eyes. You'll regret this. Not as much as you will, I said, letting the words land without raising my voice. As they left, Lucas didn't look back. Greta did once, seeing a table bare except for a cooling coffee cup in the light. The door closed, and the house seemed to sigh. I thanked Ingrid, Lena, and Carl. You didn't need us, Carl said, but you were wise to have us. Lena packed her stamp. Ingrid squeezed my shoulder. and by the time their cars pulled away, the ocean's steady breath was the only sound left. Alone, I stood in the hallway, gazing at Max's birdhouse sketch again. Birds don't mind waiting. Sometimes waiting is just the pause before the next move. That move was coming. The house was quiet again, but different from last night's tension, like the air before a gale. Now it was aftermath, weighty, deliberate, the silence of a shift that can't be undone. I stood at the pine table, fingers tracing the grain's faint scars from years of coffee mugs and weekend puzzles. Winning one round doesn't end the match. It just rewrites the rules. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Another buzz, a text from Lucas. "You've humiliated us. We'll talk later." No punctuation, no warmth. I read it twice, deleted it. If he thought I'd bite at a quick jab, he didn't know me as well as he believed. I poured fresh coffee, not for need, but to keep my hands busy while my mind worked. It tasted sharper than yesterday's, maybe brewed too long, or maybe I was just tasting more. Pacing had to stay steady now. Too fast, I'd act on heat. Too slow, they'd regroup. I opened the ledger, flipping to the earliest entries. Those numbers told a story. One I'd need to tell anyone who'd listen. A father who never said no until the asks became demands. Lucas and Greta thought they could corner me into signing away control in my own kitchen. They didn't know their papers were now my evidence. I called Carl. "They'll try again," I said. "Of course," he replied. "What's your next move?" "I want records in multiple places. County recorder, bank, my lawyer's safe. If they push, I want their moves in plain sight." "Then we'll do it," Carl said. "I'll drive tomorrow morning." I hung up, set the coffee down, and went to the office. The old metal file cabinet groaned as it opened. Inside, 40 years of documents, tax returns, contracts, even a warranty for a long-gone stove. I pulled the folder labeled House, the deed, receipts for every repair since Anna and I bought it, a letter from the Historical Society about its 1927 craftsmanship. All of it stronger than my word alone. While the printer hummed, copying each page, I thought of Max. I didn't want him caught in this fight, but he already was. His whispered warning at the party, his voice trembling but firm. He understood too much for a boy of 10. I'd have to shield him from what came next. I drove into town after lunch. Main Street was quiet, post-tourist season. First stop, the bank. Hans Becker, the branch VP, waited in his side office, a folder ready. "Account protections are set," he said. "Withdrawals over 1,000 euros need your signature and ID, no exceptions." "And the house?" I asked. "Won't any title inquiries get flagged to my desk first?" We reviewed the POA Lucas brought, and Becker pointed out 3 more clauses ripe for abuse. "They didn't expect you to read this closely," he said. "They expected trust," I replied. "It's my mistake." Next, the county recorder's office. The clerk, who knew me from a community ramp project years back, greeted me. "Hans, what brings you?" "Need to lock down my title," I said. She nodded, pulled the records, and set a monitoring flag for any activity. "You'd be surprised how often family tries to simplify things," she said quietly. "I'm not," I said. Her look said she got it. The drive home brought rain, light at first, then steady, drumming the roof like a pulse for my thoughts. At the kitchen table where they'd tried to box me in, I made a new list. Not just protections, but actions. 1. Secure finances. 2. Lock the deed. 3. Update the will. 4. Make my intentions clear to the right people. That last one mattered most. I called my lawyer, Fritz, who drafted my will after Anna's death. I want to revise it, I said. Do you add a clause? Any challenge to it triggers disinheritance, and a trust for Max, untouchable by his parents until he's of age. Enforceable, Fritz said. You're sure? Certain, I said. We set a meeting for Friday morning. 2 days to make it airtight. Evening fell under rain clouds. I made a simple dinner, grilled fish, peas, the kind Anna served when we needed grounding. Halfway through, my phone lit up with Greta's name. I let it ring, then heard her voicemail. Sharp, the honey gone. Hans, this is spiraling. Lucas and I were trying to help. If you keep dragging in outsiders, this gets messy. Think about Max. I played it twice, saved it. If she wanted to pull Max into this, I'd keep her every word. The pacing shifted to preparation. I photographed every document, saved them on 2 flash drives, one for the safe, one for the truck's glove box. I drafted a brief statement on my capacity and intentions, and Ingrid agreed to witness it tomorrow. Before bed, I called Max. Did they talk to you today? I asked. No, he said. Mama was upset, but she didn't say why. Good, I said. If she asks, say you don't know anything. Okay, Opa, are you mad at me? That question hit again, low in the chest. Never, I said. You did right. He paused, then said, Birds don't mind waiting. That's right, I said. The resolve held firm. The next morning, before my coffee was half drunk, a white envelope slid through the mail slot. No stamp, just my name in Lucas's sharp, slanted scrawl. Inside, a single sheet. We've arranged for Dr. Stein to visit tomorrow at 2 p.m. for an evaluation. Please be home. No signature, no pleasantries, just their next play. I set it beside my coffee. They wanted a competency test on their terms, with their doctor. Fine. I'd anticipated this. I called Fritz. Change of plan, I said. Can you be here tomorrow at 1:30 with someone for a fair capacity assessment? Someone they can't call biased? He chuckled. I've got just the person. I'll confirm today. The rain slowed by afternoon, and I walked the house's perimeter again. The back gate's latch was loose. I tightened it. The front steps needed sweeping. I handled it. Not for the plan, but for me. This was my home, and I'd keep it mine. By evening, I felt the shape of tomorrow. They'd come with their doctor, expecting to paint me as frail. They'd find a room set for truth, witnesses ready, and a man who'd already chosen the outcome. The game was still on, but now it was my board. The morning they picked to test my mind dawned colder than late September should be. The air sharp with a metallic bite. If they bring a storm to your door, you decide where it strikes. I stood at the kitchen counter, coffee steam curling. Not for warmth, but for the steadiness of the mug in my hands. Today, they'd question that steadiness. At 8 a.m., Fritz called. Hans, Dr. Vogel is confirmed for 1:30. Board certified in geriatrics, published on capacity assessments, no shortcuts. She'll be there. Good, I said. They're expecting Dr. Stein. A smile crept into Fritz's voice. Then they'll be nicely surprised. Today's pacing had to be measured. No rush, No last-minute shifts that looked like panic. Every move needed to feel certain. Like I'd been ready all along, I set the pine table again. My chair with the light behind me, 2 empty chairs across, witnesses by the door. Ingrid and Lena would arrive by 1:15, Carl by 1:20. The document folder sat closed in the center, untouched until I chose. At 10, I walked the property once more. The pine smelled sharper in the chill, the gravel louder under my boots. I checked the mailbox. Nothing important, but opening and closing it reminded me of Anna's daily ritual. This house wasn't just mine. It was our life, built square. And I wouldn't let anyone redraw it without my hand on the pen. My phone lit up. Greta. I answered. Hans, she said, her voice bright with falseness. Just confirming, Dr. Stein at 2. I know you arranged that, I said. I've arranged something else. Silence. Then, what's that supposed to mean? It means the evaluation will be thorough, witnessed, and documented for everyone's sake. Her tone hardened. You don't trust us. I trust the process, I said, and hung up. I could picture her staring at her phone, wondering if she'd misjudged. At 1:15, Ingrid's car rolled in. She stepped inside, setting her thermos on the sideboard, her presence steady as stone. Lena followed, journal in hand, her face blank as a locked box. Ready? Ingrid asked. Ready, I said. At 1:20, Carl arrived, collar up against the wind, eyes sweeping the room. Perfect setup, he said. Let them bring the storm. They'll find the ground solid. The shift came with tires on gravel at 1:58. 2 car doors, then voices. Greta's heels clicked on the porch, Lucas behind her, and between them a man I took for Dr. Stein. Tall, mid-50s, leather briefcase, his face set like he'd already written the report. But before they crossed the threshold, a gray sedan pulled up. Fritz stepped out, followed by a woman in a navy coat, doctor's bag in hand, her posture straight as a ruler. This is Dr. Vogel, Fritz said as they approached. Lucas's smile wavered. We already have a doctor, he said. So do I replied, which since it's my capacity on the line, both will be here. No disputes. Stein's eyes narrowed, but he entered without a word. Vogel followed, setting her bag by the chair beside mine. Greta's voice was honey over iron. Hans, this feels excessive. Then it won't be an issue, I said, gesturing to the chairs. We began. Stein started with quick questions. Date, current events, basic prompts like naming tools in a workshop. I answered with the ease of a man listing his own inventory. Then Vogel took over, digging deeper. Financial choices I'd made in the past year. Their reasons, hypotheticals about property and consent. I gave specifics, names, dates, euro amounts, straight from the ledger in my mind. Lucas shifted in his seat. Greta recrossed her legs. Half an hour in, Vogel closed her notebook. Mr. Muller, in my professional opinion, you are fully capable of managing your affairs. I see no cognitive impairment warranting any transfer of control. Stein cleared his throat. I'd like to reserve my judgment. Of course, Vogel said, but we'll file a joint report, and mine will note the witnesses and notarized record of today's proceedings. That was the strike. Clean, precise, felt by both. Lucas opened his mouth, then shut it. Greta's smile was gone. The pacing turned to closure. I slid the folder toward them. Take your documents back. I won't sign anything today or any day unless it's my terms, my time, my counsel present. Lucas's jaw tightened. We were trying to help, Papa. Help doesn't come with a pen and a deadline, I replied. And if you're worried about Max, I've made provisions for him that don't need you holding the strings. That hit. Greta's eyes flickered, recalculating, seeing the door closing. Fritz stood, buttoning his coat. This wraps up today's business. Any further talks go through my office. As they left, Vogel gave me a small nod, the kind professionals offer when the fight's won without fists. The door closed, and the house exhaled. I sat at the pine table, hand on the grain. Today wasn't the end, but it was the moment the ground held firm beneath me. In this game, that's the first step to winning. They left in 2 cars, one trailing the other, gravel dust lingering like it refused to follow. I stayed at the table long enough to hear the kettle click off. No hurry. In a fight, ink or steel, the moves after the clash matter as much as the clash itself. I poured tea, let it cool. The house was quiet, but not the trusting kind. This was the quiet of a predator slipping into the shadows, gone, but still circling. By 4:30, Fritz, Vogel, and Ingrid had left. I walked Ingrid to the gate. They'll try again, she said. Yes, I replied, but they'll be rushing, and rushers leave tracks. Ingrid gave me that slow nod she saves for raw truths, then headed home. Inside, I gathered the papers, Doctor. Stein had brought and slipped them into a plain manila envelope, not courtroom evidence yet, but a record. Records outlast lies. I tucked the envelope into the drawer where Anna kept old postcards, a spot Lucas and Greta would never check. Worthless to them, priceless to me. That was the first layer of my counterattack. Let them misjudge where the real value lies. At 6 p.m., my phone rang. Not the house line, my cell. Max's name glowed on the screen. Opa, they're upset, he whispered before I could speak. Mama slammed a cabinet, and Papa told her to hush, but I heard him say they'll find another way. My grip tightened on the phone. You did right calling me. You're okay. Yeah, but Opa... His voice shrank. Will they take the house anyway? I took a slow breath. Not if I can stop it, Max. And I can. I hung up, his words echoing. Another way could mean anything, but I knew it was likely something I'd overlooked. Or worse, something I'd hoped they wouldn't try. That night, sleep didn't come. I paced the halls, touching the framed photos. Lucas at 9 in a soccer jersey, Anna with a kite on the shore, Max painting at the kitchen table. Each was a moment no one could reclaim. The house, though, that was different. The next morning, I called Carl. They're regrouping, I said. Good, he replied. Means they're unsteady. We met at a diner in town, black coffee steaming between us. Boundary survey, Carl said. File it. If they try claiming confusion over what's yours, county records will kill that before it starts. By noon, I was at the surveyor's office. A man named Klaus shook my hand, said he'd have it done by Friday. Trouble brewing? He asked. Just ensuring the foundation's solid, I said. He grinned, but I wasn't joking. I was locking the side door when headlights swept the wall. Not Lucas's truck, too low. Greta's SUV. She didn't knock, just came around back, heels clicking on the stone path. "Hans," she said, her voice syrupy, masking the sting. "We should talk, just us. No lawyers, no witnesses." I leaned against the doorframe. "If you think that'll make me softer, you've read me wrong." She stepped closer. "You're boxing yourself in. We could have kept this quiet, but now—" She stopped, glancing at the neighbor's light flicking on. "Now what?" I asked. She straightened. "Now you either sign a voluntary transfer of interest, or Lucas will push for probate while you're still breathing." My jaw tightened. "You've done your research. So have I." I opened the door just enough for her to see the manila envelope on the counter. "Every word, every signature you've pushed, logged. If I need to, that's with the sheriff before dark." Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't." I gave a faint smile. "You don't know me as well as you think." She left, her heels hitting the stones harder than before, the sound of someone leaving with less than they brought. Over the next 2 days, I moved quietly. I called an insurance friend to review my homeowner's policy, rerouting all contact away from Lucas. I updated my will, making Max's trust ironclad, with Ingrid as co-trustee. Then, because counterattacks hit hardest from unseen angles, I visited the county treasurer's office. A lesser-known option. A life estate with retained powers. I'd live in and control the house, but the remainder interest, my chosen heir, would be locked in. I named Max. Leaving that office, the October wind stung my face, but it didn't matter. The foundation was set. If Lucas and Greta wanted to move me now, they'd be dragging anchors they didn't know I'd placed. Friday, Klaus delivered the survey report, meeting me at the property line. "No disputes. Boundaries clean. You're solid." I shook his hand, thinking how survival often hinges on picking the right allies early. Saturday morning, Max came over, paint smudged on his hands. "I drew something," he said, handing me a sheet. It was our house, but with a taller fence, gate shut, and him inside, waving. Above, in his careful block letters, "Safe." I pinned it to the corkboard by the kitchen door. "Exactly right," I said, because now it was. 2 days later, Lucas and Greta returned. Lucas's voice clipped, sharp, no longer playing at family warmth. Greta led, her heels striking the kitchen tile like she owned the rhythm. Ingrid and Carl were already seated, a silent wall of witnesses, with Lena in the corner. Notary journal closed but ready. I'd left the manila envelope on the mantel, in plain sight. Truth doesn't hide. They didn't sit. Lucas paced behind Greta like a restless lawyer. She gripped the back of a chair, addressing the room like it was a courtroom. "Hans," she began, voice low but calculated. "We've tried to make this easy." I met her gaze, silent. She glanced at Lucas, and the air shifted. He stepped forward, hands in pockets, eyes hard. "We didn't want this," he said. "We hoped you'd be reasonable, but it's about Max." His name hit like a stone. A tightness gripped my chest. Not medical, but the kind that holds your breath hostage. I kept my face steady, but something coiled inside. Greta's eyes sharpened, sensing a crack. "If you don't sign the transfer and power of attorney," she said, "there won't be funds for his tuition next term. You know the costs. We can't cover it without accessing your assets." Ingrid tensed beside me, but I didn't flinch. I let their words settle, testing them like a carpenter checks wood for flaws. Greta pressed on. And we can't have him in this stress. It's not good for him. Lucas added quickly. It's temporary, but if you keep pushing us, it might need to be permanent. I let the silence settle. Inside, I saw Max last month in the backyard, sleeves rolled up, smearing blue paint on a birdhouse's roof, explaining how birds don't mind waiting. The way he looked at me, like I was the one who could keep his world steady. Now they were wielding him like a bargaining chip. Part of me wanted to give in, sign their papers if it meant seeing him this weekend, hearing him ramble about colors and wood glue. But the harder part, tempered by tougher years, knew yielding now would only prove their tactic worked. Next time, they'd push harder. You're saying, I said evenly, if I don't sign over my home and rights, I won't see my grandson? Lucas didn't blink. We're saying Max's well-being comes first. Then why? I asked. Does this feel like blackmail, not care? Greta leaned in. You can be part of what's best for him, Hans, if you trust us to manage things. Carl's fingers tapped once on the table, our signal to stay steady. I thought of Max's last visit, paint on his fingers, laughing when the breeze nearly stole his sketch. His eyes, open, trusting, saw me as the one who kept things safe. If I caved now, I'd have him for a day, maybe 2. Long term, I'd be signing away the ground he stood on. You know, I said, Max told me he wanted to show me his new birdhouse. A sparrow, I think. Greta's smile thinned. He can still show you, once this is settled. The fridge hummed softly. Lena shifted her pen. That, I said, isn't love. That's leverage. Lucas's jaw tightened. Call it what you want. I stood slowly, the chair legs scraping lightly on the pine floor. Say it again, I told him. The part where I don't see Max if I don't sign. He hesitated. Greta cut in. You heard us. I did, I said, nodding toward Lena. And so did our witness, who'll record it before the day's out. Greta's eyes flickered, just enough to show the hit landed. Papa, Lucas said, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not making it harder, I replied. I'm making it clear. I took the folder from the mantel, set it on the table. Take this, I said. I'm not signing. Not today, not ever. Not when my grandson's part of the deal. Lucas's voice hardened. And then you're the one keeping him from you. If that's your story, I said, cling to it. The room felt heavy, like air before a squall. Ingrid's knuckles whitened around her thermos. Carl's gaze stayed on Lucas. Greta sat, arms crossed, voice cold. We'll take other steps. You can't stop us forever. Forever's not the goal, I said. Today is, and today you showed me how low you'll go. Lena opened her journal, writing. Lucas grabbed the folder, tucking it under his arm like something he'd taken by force. At the door, he turned. You brought this on yourself. No, I said. You brought Max into it. The door shut. Engines started. I stood until their cars vanished. Ingrid exhaled. That was rough. It was honest, I said. Carl leaned back. They're not done. That was a warning shot. Next will be formal. Let them, I said. They've played their best card. Now I play mine. I took my notebook, wrote 3 words in block letters. Guardianship, custody, contempt. Birds don't mind waiting, I thought, especially when the tide's turning. 3 days later, I drove to their house with a bag of Max's favorite almond biscuits. The plan: drop them off, maybe see him at the door. As I pulled into their driveway, the front curtains twitched, then nothing. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Silence. The bag felt heavier than it should. I left it on the porch and drove off. The next day, I called Lucas, straight to voicemail. No message left. I'd learned they went unanswered. 2 more calls that week, same result. Greta didn't pick up either. By the second week, I decided to catch Max at school. Not ideal, but I needed to know he was okay. I parked across from the playground before dismissal. Kids poured out, backpacks bouncing, voices loud. I spotted Max, messy braid, green jacket zipped high, laughing with a friend, eyes bright, his usual spark. I stepped out, raised a hand. His face lit up for a moment. Then Greta's SUV screeched in, blocking my view. She leaned across, opened the door, and Max climbed in without a wave. The SUV sped off before I could move. That night, I sat with Max's birdhouse sketch, tracing its lines, wondering what Greta had told him about my absence, wondering if he knew why I'd vanished from his weekends. The ache was sharper than when Anna passed, deliberate, inflicted. Week 3, I tried once more, unannounced. Saturday morning, I drove over with a small wooden box I'd carved for his paints. Lucas answered, filling the doorway. "Not a good time," he said. "When is?" I asked. He shrugged. "We'll let you know." "You said temporary," I reminded him. "It is, but pushing doesn't help." His tone had the edge of someone holding all the cards. I took a slow breath. "Tell him I stopped by." No reply, just the door closing, the latch clicking. By the time I got home, I knew their game. Wait me out. Let the absence wear me down until I'd call Greta and say, "Fine, I'll sign." But it only sharpened my resolve. That Monday, I called Fritz. "They've cut me off," I said. No visits, no calls, nearly a month." His voice was steady but firm. "Then we go to court." The words hit heavy. Will it hold here? Grandparents have standing if they prove a strong bond and harm from its loss. You've got both. Consistent caregiver, witnesses. Ingrid, Carl, even your neighbor who's seen Max weekly. "I don't want him dragged through this," I said. "You're not dragging him. You're protecting his tie to you. That counts in court. If we don't act, they'll claim you've stepped away willingly." We met at his office that afternoon, the air cool, blinds half drawn. He'd prepared forms, petition for grandparent visitation, motion for temporary contact. "We're asking for a temporary order first," he explained, sliding papers to me. "It restores contact while we build the full case. Judges don't like kids losing positive bonds during disputes." I read slowly, the legal terms dense but clear. Petitioner, me. Respondents, Lucas and Greta. My son's name on the other side of the V, a line you never expect to cross. Fritz outlined the process. "We file with the county court. They'll serve notice to Lucas and Greta. First hearing for the temporary order, likely a week or 2. Then we prep for permanent visitation." "What if they claim I'm unfit?" I asked. "We prove otherwise. Clean record, steady finances, documented role in Max's life. Photos, texts, testimony. You've done nothing wrong, Hans. I signed where he pointed, the pen scratching the heavy paper. Each signature felt like crossing a bridge you can't uncross. The March wind bit as I left Fritz's office, sharp enough to cut through my coat. I drove home, radio off, my mind replaying moments with Max, painting on the deck, reading by the fire, fishing at the creek. If Lucas and Greta wanted to erase that, they'd have to face a judge. That night, I took out my notebook and listed every time Max had been at my house in the past year, every holiday we'd shared, every school event I'd attended. By midnight, it filled 3 pages. Proof, not just for court, but for me, that our bond was real, worth fighting for. The next morning, I called Ingrid. I told her my plan. "If you need me to testify, I'm there," she said without pause. Carl echoed her. Even Lena, who'd witnessed the last kitchen meeting, agreed to turn her notes into an affidavit. The following week, the court clerk called with a date. Temporary order hearing, April 14th, 2 weeks out. 2 weeks until I could face Lucas and Greta in court and say, "This isn't yours to take." That afternoon, I stood by the fence, gazing at the horizon. Birds don't mind waiting, I thought. But waiting isn't giving up. This fight was just starting. The courthouse smelled of polish and old paper, a scent that clings to wood. I'd been here for property filings, but never like this. Today, it wasn't about lines on a map. It was about a boy with paint on his hands and a laugh I'd know anywhere. Fritz met me on the courthouse steps, briefcase tucked tight. "They're inside," he said. "Lucas, Greta, their lawyer." I nodded. Their kitchen threat, that's not love, that's leverage, still burned in my memory. We passed security. The metal detector pinged at the coins in my pocket. I dropped them into the tray, their rattle loud in the morning's quiet. Inside the courtroom, the benches were half full. Ingrid and Carl sat together in the second row. Carl gave a curt nod. Lena was there, her notary journal on her lap, though she wouldn't use it today. Lucas sat at the respondent's table in a dark suit, worn but formal. Greta sat beside him, spine rigid, hair in a tight bun. Her eyes flicked over me, unreadable, then away. The judge entered, a woman with gray hair in a neat bun. She adjusted her glasses and called the case. Petition for grandparent visitation. Hans Muller versus Lucas Muller and Greta Muller. My surname on both sides of the V felt like a crack in the earth. Fritz stood. "Your Honor, my client has been a steady, positive presence in his grandson's life since birth, acting as a caregiver, meeting his needs, and maintaining a close bond until the respondents abruptly cut off contact without cause. We seek a temporary visitation order to preserve that bond while the court reviews the full petition." Their lawyer rose. "Your Honor, my clients acted in their son's best interest. The environment at Mr. Muller's home has grown tense due to ongoing property disputes. They believe limiting contact is necessary until those are resolved." The judge looked at Lucas. "Is that accurate, Mr. Muller?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lucas said, voice polished. "We want a stable environment for Max. This has caused strain." Fritz leaned in, whispering, "They're framing it as mutual." I nodded. "Wait." When my turn came, Fritz asked direct questions. "Mr. Muller, describe your role in Max's life before contact was cut." I spoke of Saturday mornings making waffles, walking him to the bus when Lucas worked early, Afternoons in my shed building birdhouses. I kept it plain. Truth doesn't need embellishment. When did you last see him? Fritz asked. Over a month ago, I said. They said I wouldn't see him until I signed over my house and power of attorney. A murmur rippled through the room. Their lawyer objected, but the judge raised a hand. I'll allow it. Continue. Fritz turned to Lena. Miss Schmidt, what did you witness on February 17th? Lena stood, voice clear. I was at Mr. Muller's home as a neutral witness. I heard Mrs. Muller state that unless Mr. Muller signed property transfer documents, he wouldn't see his grandson. I recorded it in my journal. The judge requested the entry. Lena passed it to the bailiff, who handed it up. The judge read silently, then eyed Lucas and Greta. Did you make that statement? Greta shifted. It was out of context. Answer the question, the judge said. Yes, Greta said, voice tight. But enough. The judge cut in. Fritz rested his hands on the table. Your Honor, this isn't about stability. It's about using a child as leverage in a separate dispute, the very thing the law aims to prevent. Their lawyer tried to shift focus to family autonomy and emotional strain, but the judge's face stayed stone. She made notes, then spoke. I'm granting the petitioner's motion for temporary visitation. Effective immediately, Mr. Muller will have visitation with Max every other weekend, starting this Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., at his residence. Exchanges will occur at the police substation parking lot for neutrality. Both parties are ordered to avoid disparaging remarks about each other in the child's presence. The gavel struck, sharp and final. Lucas's jaw clenched. He didn't look at me. Greta whispered to him as they gathered their things. Fritz packed his files. This is a win, he said quietly. Temporary orders often shape final ones. I nodded, already thinking of Saturday. Ingrid squeezed my arm as we left. You did right. I hope he thinks so, I said. Saturday was cold and clear. I reached the substation early, the yellow lines bright in the sun. At 10 sharp, Greta's SUV pulled in. Max stepped out, backpack slung over one shoulder, and broke into a run when he saw me. I knelt, and he hugged me tight, his breath warm against my coat. Opa, he said, muffled. I made a new birdhouse. It's better than the last. I pulled back to see his face, bright as ever. Can't wait to see it, I said. Over his shoulder, Greta was already climbing back into her SUV, her face blank. For the first time in weeks, I didn't care what she thought. Max was here, and that was enough. At home, he spread his paints on the kitchen table, afternoon light catching his hair. The fridge's hum was the only other sound. Watching him dip his brush, I realized waiting like a bird isn't about the tide turning on its own. It's knowing when to strike. This was the first strike. I watched Lucas's taillights fade into the courthouse mist, swallowed by a gray that seemed to seal the moment. Greta followed, head down, phone to her ear, words sharp and quick. No sweetness left. I didn't need to hear to know they were scrambling to regroup. They'd never stop scheming, but it didn't matter. The judge's order was stamped, signed, filed. I'd see Max every week, unsupervised, starting now. Fritz walked beside me down the steps, voice low. You didn't just win, Hans. You snapped their strongest weapon in two. I nodded, but the weight I'd carried didn't lift fully. It unraveled slowly, like untwisting wire. Across the street, Ingrid stood with Max, who'd waited the whole time. His small frame was tense, eyes searching until they found me. Then he lit up, running faster than I had ever seen, sneakers slapping wet pavement, hair flying like a flag. He crashed into me, arms tight around my waist, face buried in my jacket. "You came back," he whispered, those words holding weeks of fear. I hugged him close, catching the faint paint scent on his sleeves. "I never left, Max," I said, hand over my heart. "Not here." He looked up, eyes wet but fierce. "They said maybe you didn't want to see me anymore." The words cut like cold iron. I cupped his face. "Never true. Not for a second. Don't let anyone say otherwise." He nodded, fingers still gripping my coat. Over his shoulder, Lucas stood by his truck, arms crossed, jaw tight. Greta was beside him, lips a thin line. They didn't speak or approach. No last-minute deals, just silence. The gap between us would only grow. On the drive home, Max's voice filled the car like sunlight breaking through fog. He talked about his birdhouse, how he'd added brighter green for the roof because birds should match the trees they perch in. He didn't mention Lucas or Greta, and neither did I. The court order gave me weekends, but the real win was here. His legs swinging, hands waving as he spoke. That evening, we walked to the creek, his birdhouse painting under his arm, framed in pine. He set it against a post with care. "It's done now," he said softly. "See, the roof's ready." I studied the careful strokes, each color chosen with intent. "It's beautiful," I said, "like the artist." His smile was free, unshadowed. For a moment, the air felt light. When he went to bed, I stood in the guest room doorway, listening to his steady breathing. That sound was peace, the kind I'd chased without knowing. Downstairs, the manila envelope sat on the mantel, heavier now with certified copies of the order, life estate deed, and my will, naming Max as the heir when the time comes. Locks on gates, seen and unseen. I thought of Lucas and Greta, not with anger, but with clear distance. Tonight, they'd go home, sit in separate rooms, speak in sharp bursts, maybe argue over their missteps. Somewhere in their silence, they'd feel it. They hadn't just lost a court fight. They'd lost their grip on me and Max. No judge could return that. Upstairs, Max stirred but didn't wake. I turned off the light, letting darkness settle like a steady hand over the house. Outside, the tide moved with the wind, patient, sure. A bird waits because it knows stillness is part of the hunt. I'd learned that too. Waiting isn't surrender. It's the strength to guard what matters until the moment to act. One day, Lucas and Greta would look back and see me where they tried to push me out. Free, unyielding, protecting the only treasure worth the fight. In the end, a life's measure isn't what you win, but what you refuse to lose.